Let me put all my cards on the table because everything in this video depends on where I sit. In my first 5 years in real estate while working a corporate job, I built to 21 properties held today, somewhere between 50 and 75 total transactions, and over 10 million in combined portfolio and transactional volume. That figure is volume, not net worth, and I'll always tell you which is which. It started with a decision no guru will ever flex. I sold my 2,500 square foot family home and moved my family into a house half the size to free up roughly $80,000. That was the seed planted. And here's the part that changes what I'm allowed to say in this video. Today, my company puts capital behind other investors. Over $500,000 funded across 7 clients so far this month alone. I'm not just an investor telling you how lenders think, I'm the lender. So I've now read deals from both chairs, the borrower's chair, dozens of my own transactions, and the lender's chair, file after file from other investors. And from that second chair, you see one pattern you cannot see as a borrower. Everyone gets stuck the same way. High income, real savings, real discipline, and a portfolio that stops the exact day their savings due. They all believe the same wrong thing, that the limit on their real estate is their own money. From the lender's chair, that belief is visibly false. The limit is something else and is sitting in their file. Here's who this is for. And be honest about which one you are. You earn 6 figures, you have real savings sitting in an account doing close to nothing, and you want to get into real estate. But you refuse to gamble your family's security on it. So you study, you save, and you never buy. Or you already own 1, 2, 3, 5 doors. You bought them the disciplined way, 20% down from your own pocket every time, and your portfolio stalled the exact day your cash did. You find deals right now that you cannot fund. 2 different moments, same wall. I have personally stood at both of them. Here's the ground we're covering. The arithmetic of why the way everyone buys guarantees the wall, and exactly which door it arrives at. What a lender actually reads when your file lands on his desk or hers from someone who does the reading. How to read your own file like a lender this weekend before you ever apply anywhere. In one of my own properties, walk start to finish, settlement statement on screen so you can see what the machine really returns, including the honest version of the math, not the fantasy one. Lenders fund the operator, not the property, which means your savings were never the real constraint on your portfolio. Your fundability is. Real estate is capital heavy. It just doesn't have to be your capital. The investors who scale past door 3 don't save harder. They become someone lenders keep saying yes to. One promise, and hold me to it. By the end of this video, you'll believe that lenders fund people, not properties. But I want you to watch something else while I earn that. Watch how you decide whether to trust me. Notice what actually moves you and what doesn't. And at the end, I'll show you that the way you graded me for the last 40 minutes is exactly the way a lender grades you. And once you see yourself doing it, you'll never unsee what your own file says. Let's start with the math nobody runs out loud. Because once you run it, the wall stops being a mystery and becomes a schedule. Run your own numbers on this. Mine are round on purpose. Say you earn about $100,000 or more, and after real life, you can put away about $25,000 a year. That's discipline. Most people can't do it. Now, price a door, a modest investment, property, let's say around $250,000. They want 20% down. That's $50,000 plus closing costs, plus the reserves any sane person holds. Plus the reserves any sane person holds back. Call it $60,000 to $70,000 per door all in, the conventional way. So every single door costs you 2 to 3 years of elite saving discipline. Door 1, 3 years. Door 2, 3 more. And that assumes prices sit still and wait for you, which they don't. Which means the conventional path was never a wealth plan. It's a savings race, and a savings race is a race your salary loses by design because the pace is set by your leftover income, not by your skill. Now, you can see why both versions of you hit the same wall. The professional before door one looks at the schedule, refuses to dump the family's whole cushion into one illiquid bet, and rationally does nothing. His discipline is real, it's just aimed at a losing race. The investor at door three already ran the race as hard as it can be run. Their reward for doing everything right is a portfolio that stopped growing the day the savings account hit its floor. I did everything right and ran out of money at door three. I can afford the deal. I can't afford to be wrong with our money. The savings race. One road, two stall points. Two different lives, one mechanism. The pace of the conventional path is set by a leftover salary, not by skill. That's why more discipline never fixes it. The race itself is the problem. Now, the part I'm qualified to say that almost nobody else in your feed is, what does a lender actually look at? Let's answer it properly, because the answer is the opposite of what the lane has taught you. You heard it 100 times. Hard money is asset-based. The property is collateral. If the deal numbers work, the money shows up. Every no money down video is built on that idea. And to be fair to it, collateral is real. If everything burns down, the lender takes the property. That part is true. But think one step further. The way the person writes the check has to. Collateral is what protects a lender when things go wrong. If it's not what makes things go right, the property cannot sign documents. The property cannot manage a renovation, hold a schedule, or handle the roof nobody priced. Only the operator does that. A lender doesn't want to own your house. Taking the property back is their worst outcome. Months of process, legal costs, and a half-finished renovation in the market they didn't choose. So the real question a lender asks is never, is this a good property? Is this the kind of person whose project finishes? Which is why when your file lands on my desk, the property is one page and you are the rest. Here's what the file actually says about you, piece by piece. The structure. Is there a real entity and how old is it? An established LLC reads like a business. A week-old one reads like impulse. The credit file. Around 700 or better isn't about the score itself. It's a decade of receipts on one question. Does this person honor obligations when nobody's watching? The paperwork. Can you produce lender-grade documents, clean, complete, and fast, or timely? A file that arrives organized tells me the renovation will run the same way. A file I have to chase tells me the schedule will be chased too. The reserves. Not does it that someone needs my money, but can they survive a surprise without abandoning the project? Idle capital. The exact thing you're embarrassed about reads a strength from this chair. The buying discipline. Does the deal show margin and buffers, or is it priced on hope? This one is a whole video of its own, and it's the next one. Put it together and you get the sentence I want tattooed behind this whole channel. Lenders fund the investor, not the property. The market has convinced you that you're short on money. From this chair, most of the stuck people I read are not short on money at all. They're short at being legible to people who have it. What the file weighs from the chair that writes the check. This property is one page of the decision. You are the rest of it. That's not my opinion about lenders. It's my job description as one. You're not stuck because you're careless. The people I'm describing run budgets bigger than most businesses. This stays invincible for 3 specific reasons. The 20% script came from the wrong universe. Everything you know about property finance, you learned as a homeowner. Consumer mortgage logic, down payment, 30 years, your W-2 carrying a loan. You translated those rules into investing because they're the only rules you were ever handed. But investors, lending is a different animal with different math, and nobody sets you down to say the rules change. The gurus poisoned the well from the other side. The no money down crowd took the true half of the idea and sold it as a trick. A serious professional smells the hype correctly and throws out the whole category. Your skepticism is good judgment, aimed slightly wrong. The lie isn't that outside capital exists. The lie is that it's free and requires nothing from you. It requires a fundable operator, which is exactly the part they skip. Fundability isn't a line item. Your net worth is on a statement. Your savings balance is on an app you check weekly. There is no dashboard anywhere in your life that shows what lenders will say about me. So the visible number, the savings, gets treated as the constraint, and the invisible one runs your life. A number you never see can't feel like a problem. And here's the proof at industry scale that information was never the missing piece. Go look at Bigger Pockets, for example. The BRRRR strategy, buy, renovate, rent, refinance, repeat, was named and popularized there years ago. Free forums, books, a decade of podcasts, every step documented in public thousands of times. The method is famous. The behavior hasn't moved. The standard professional still saves 20% down door by door and still stalls at door 3. If the how were the constraint, a decade of free, how would have removed the wall? It didn't. Because the constraint was never information. It's fundability, and fundability can't be downloaded. I want you to read your own file like a lender this weekend. You don't need to apply anywhere to find out what lenders would say. Sit down and grade yourself the way the other chair would. 5 checks. The entity. Do you have one? Is it real? How old is it? No entity or a brand new one is the single most common gap I see. And it's also the most fixable. Note, an established entity is the fast lane. A fresh one adds seasoning time, months, not days. A fresh one adds seasoning time, months, not days. I'll say that honestly now, so nobody hears instant. The credit file, pull it around 700 or above, or close with a clear pat. You're in the conversation. The gate matters, and I won't pretend it doesn't. The paperwork test. Could you produce lender grade documents inside 48 hours? Entity docs, 2 years of income, a personal financial statement. If assembling that takes you 3 weeks, your file reads exactly like your renovation will. The reserves. Write down what you could leave untouched as a cushion. The money you have been ashamed of for doing nothing is about to become your strongest line on that page. The deal evidence. If you bought before, does your history show margin and buffers or luck? If you haven't bought yet, this box is empty, not filled, and the method below is how it gets filled correctly. Score yourself honestly, and one of those things happens. Either you discover you're closer to fundable than you ever suspected, which is most 6-figure professionals I read, or you find the 2 or 3 specific gaps named fixable with a sequence. Both beat what you had this morning, which was a vague feeling that you need more saved. The weekend file review, be sure to grade yourself from the other chair. The entity and its age, business or impulse. The credit file, 700 or a clear pat, a decade of receipts. Lender grade paperwork inside 48 hours. How your projects will run. The reserves you could leave untouched. Survive the surprises. The deal evidence, margin and buffers, or luck. No application, no rejection risk, no cost. By Sunday evening, you'll know your gaps by name. And a name gap has a sequence. A vague, I need more saved, never did. The method and why it beats the race. Everything I do for myself and for investors we fund runs one method. I call it the funded operator model. 3 parts, always in this order. Get capital ready. That's the job. Build the fundable file, the entity, credit profile, lender grade paperwork. The payoff. With an established entity, readiness and first approvals move in weeks, not years, and it replaces years of savings. Number 2, buy right. The job, cost and schedule discipline. Real due diligence, buffers for the hidden roof. The payoff. You make more money when you buy, not when you sell. And what it replaces is the pro forma written on hope. Number 3, recycle the capital. The job, renovate, rent, refinance, pull the capital back out, go back at it again. The payoff, each cycle deepens the track record and the track record widens the capital. It replaces, what it replaces is 21 separate down payments. Why it beats the old way? The conventional path scales on your leftover salary. This one scales on your operating skill, and the skill is the one input that compounds instead of depleting. That's how 3 doors become 21 without 21 down payments. And notice what part 2 is doing in the middle of that method, because it's the part every other people's money pitch skips. Buying right isn't just how you protect profit. Buying right is what makes lenders keep funding you. The discipline is fundability. One approval makes you fund it once. The file you build by operating well is what makes you fund it forever. That's also the protection from the honest danger here. Leverage cuts both ways. Financed at 85% and bought wrong, you lose faster than a saver ever could, which is exactly why the discipline sits in the dead center of the method and not the fine print. One property, start to finish, statement on the screen, right? Let me make this concrete with my own paper, because in this lane, proof means rented sports cars, and I'd rather show you a settlement statement with real numbers. One of my properties run through the full cycle. Bought right, meaning bought with margin and a buffer, not hope. Renovated on schedule. Rented to a paying tenant, then refinanced. On a settlement statement on that refinance, that line that matters read $53,846, cash to borrower at closing. That's not a sale profit. I still own this property. The tenant still is paying the mortgage. The capital that had been buried in the walls came back out and went into the next door. That single line is the entire belief of this video. In one document, the money that keep going didn't come from my salary or my savings. It came from the asset because the lender looked at the file, the operator, the track record, and said yes. The cycle that replaced the savings race, one property walked. This is a machine. The savings race never becomes. The same capital used again and again while the doors accumulate. And every cycle, a lender says yes to another line in that file that makes the next yes easier. Now, the honest math, because this is where I refuse to sell you a fantasy version. The fantasy version is all over YouTube. Burr gives you infinite returns. Every dollar comes back. Cycle forever. Write it down. It's a lie. Derive why. Appraisals come in where they come in. It's not where your spreadsheet hope. Lenders leave real equity in the deal. They don't cash you out on the last dollar. Refinances have cost, and rate matters, and seasoning is real. Lenders want time between purchases and the refi. So some cycles return most of your capital, some return part of it, and every cycle takes months, not weeks. So here's my actual pace on paper. Across many refinances over my first few years, my settlement statement read over a few $100,000 that got me cash back at closing, and 3 sales along the way and 9 statements total. So here's my actual pace on paper. Across 6 refinances in 3 years, my settlement statement showed $187,000 in cash back to me at closing, add 3 sales along the way, and the 9 statements totaled about $432,000 in documented cash received at closing. Put that 187 next to the savings race, and that discipline, $25,000 a year, recycling return would have taken over 7 years of savings. And it didn't, while the property stayed mine and the tenants paid down the debt. Slower than the fantasy, but yet years faster than the race. That's the honest sentence, and it's only one I'll put my statements behind. That's the honest sentence, and it's the only one I'll put my statements behind. The fantasy versus my actual paper, capital returned at closing. Every dollar, every cycle is a lie. The middle bar is the only one backed by settlement statements. Slower than the fantasy years, ahead of the race, and the properties stay on my side of the ledger the whole time. The gap between the top bar and the middle bar is why you should trust the middle bar. And so you don't think that this only works for me. The same method run by people who started with none of my history. 2 of my students started with 0 real estate experience. LLCs formed, capital access, roughly $50,000 in combined flip profits. And today, 5 rentals held with the offer out on door number 7. In about 3 years, both kept working their 9 to 5s the whole way. Real results, not typical ones. And I would never promise them to you. A general contractor client is running from a different angle entirely. He got 2 new construction duplexes underway with none of his own money out of pocket because his file, his operating history, was fundable the day we structured it. A W-2 professional part-time, a contractor full-time, same method, opposite lives. The pattern isn't about who you are, it's about what your file says. Who this isn't for. The gate is real, and I won't blur it. This works when lenders have something to read. Income around 6 figures, close, maybe a little more, a little less. A credit file near 700 or a clear path to it. And capital or equity to structure around. If you're struggling to make ends meet or you need funding to survive rather than to invest, this is not your video. And anyone who tells you otherwise is selling you something. This is not a no money involved trick. Reserves matter. Skin in the game matters. What changes is whose capital carries the 20% weight and how fast it comes back, not whether seriousness is required. Leverage punishes bad buying faster than cash does. If you take outside capital into an undisciplined deal, you have not solved your problem. You accelerated it. Fundability without a buying discipline is a loaded tool in an untrained hands. That's not a throwaway warning. It's in the next video. The timeline honesty. With an established entity, capital readiness and first approvals move in weeks. With a brand entity and months of seasoning, anyone promising you day one funding on a day one LLC is describing a fantasy, and you now know enough to hear it. The move I ran on you, right? At the top, I asked you to watch how you decide whether to trust me. Let's check the tape because you did something more interesting than watch a video. Not one of you paused to look up my properties. You didn't check comps on any address. The properties, the collateral, barely registered. What moved you was the file. The 5 years while employed, the settlement statements with real line items on them, the house we downsized to start, the scars I've mentioned, and the real numbers I refused to inflate. Volume never called net worth. Results labeled real and never typical. The fantasy Mac called a lie to your face. In other words, you spent this whole video funding the operator, not the property. You graded me exactly the way a lender will grade you. Trust flowed to the structure, receipts, discipline, and honesty about downside, and away from anything that smelled like hope. That instinct you just used is the entire thesis. Lenders are not a different species. They're doing what you just did with a checklist and money on the line. Now you know exactly what your own file has to say because you know what you just needed to hear. Before you trust me with 40 minutes, imagine what a stranger needs before trusting you with 200,000. One more thing, and it's a deep trap. This was never about lenders. It's about which number you've been managing. Your whole financial life trained you to watch the balance. Savings up, debt down, the number on the app. You manage the number you can see, fundability. The number that actually sets your ceiling has no app. So it went unmanaged for a decade while you polished the visible one. The trap generalizes. Whatever you can't see, you can't manage. And whatever you can't manage, manages you. The wall at door 3 was never a money problem. It was a visibility problem wearing a money costume. And the honest limit of doing this from a video, because I'd rather tell you now than let you find out expensively. The file, you can genuinely start this weekend. The 5 checks are yours. What a video can't hand you is the judgment layer. Which lender for which deal. How to sequence the fixes. What a specific file needs before it's ready. And the buy right discipline that keeps the yes coming. That's earned across many files, and I read files for a living. If you're a professional with income or capital to deploy, and you want the operator who funds sitting in your corner, that's exactly the work I do. Everyone else, run the 5 checks, they cost nothing, and they tell you the truth. Your savings were never the constraint. Your fundability is. And unlike your salary, fundability is a thing you can build. It's not a sprint, it's a marathon. And a marathon has a starting line, the file. What this doesn't fix, and where we go next, right? Here's what you can do now. Run the 5 checks this weekend, pull a credit file, time yourself assembling the paperwork, write down the reserves. You'll know your 2 or 3 gaps by Sunday night, and every one of them has a fix with a sequence. But be very careful with what this video just did for you, because it removed your safest limitations. The wall at door 3 was frustrating, but it was also protecting you. You couldn't buy wrong at scale, because you couldn't buy at scale at all. Become fundable, and that protection is gone. Outside capital makes good buying compound and buying catastrophic. The skill that decides which one you get is the buy, because SCARs are the only school that issues that diploma. I paid that tuition personally on one deal and one number. A flip spreadsheet said I would make about $40,000, and they paid me about $7,500. Still profitable, but not what I had expected. Where did that $32,500 go? The answer is 2 levers almost nobody prices, and walking you through that autopsy line by line is the next video. These steps are a sequence, one method assembling across them. Watch them in order, and by the end of it, you'll hold the whole machine. The series is the funded operator model, assembling one video at a time. Next, the $40,000 lesson. The flip my own spreadsheet promised $40K on, and what actually happened to the money. The 2 levers nobody prices, and why buying discipline is the half of other people's money that decides whether leverage builds you or breaks you.